Hey, it's Doc Solo here from Ka-Pow, the Comic Art Academy, the real art school for real people with real lives, taught by real industry pros. And man, do I have a treat for you guys today. Now, it may seem a little counterintuitive, this interview, but trust me, the information my next guest provides is actually golden and really in alignment with what we do here at Ka-Pow and why Ka-Pow actually exists. A little backstory. See, a few months ago, it popped up into my YouTube feed just arbitrarily. We know how the algorithm works. A fledgling YouTuber like myself did this incredibly insightful monologue about their experience in art school. Now, those who know me know I have never been to art school. I am fundamentally self-taught, which is just a different type of education. Neither good nor bad, just is what it is, right? But many people seek formal institutions that sometimes don't necessarily deliver on exactly what the prospective student is looking for. And so this is really one of the reasons why I created Ka-Pow. And just hearing it from someone that experienced it firsthand, I thought was very important and very, very crucial. And again, it is a little self-serving because we are an online educational option, but not a traditional school. And for those of you who may be on the fence, maybe this will help you guys come to some definitive conclusions on your next moves as it pertains to pursuing the comic craft. Now, as with all things, we seek balance here at Ka-Pow. I'm a person of truth. I like truth. I like balance. I like objectivity. And here we're going to discuss with Mel Mitchell Jackson the truth about art school, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So hope you guys enjoy my sit down, Art2Art with Mel Mitchell Jackson from Persistent Bloom. Check it out. Hey, Ka-Pow fam. It is I, Doc Solo, your guy, the director and founder of Ka-Pow, the Comic Art Academy, the real art school for real people with real lives, taught by real industry pros. And I have a treat for you guys today. And believe it or not, it is someone that is non-comics adjacent. But I came across this YouTuber's channel. It popped up in my feed. And I was fascinated by what they had to say. And so with that being said, without further ado, we're going to head and roll the intro. I guess the intro's not rolling. I'll add that in post. So, wrong scene. Okay. Thank God for editing. All right. Today we have Mel Mitchell Jackson. Hello, Mel. It is a pleasure to sit down with you today. Thanks for taking the time out.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
You got a lot of sunlight there. Are you someplace sunny? What area in the country are you in? Roundabout.
I live in the Bay Area.
Okay, in the Bay Area. Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm headed out to LA
California
this weekend. Yeah, Cali.
Awesome.
What's it about artists that love to flock out to Cali?
I think, I used to come out here because my dad's best friend lived outside of LA. Okay. And so as a kid, it was like cheap to travel to go stay with your friend.
Right.
And like my dad's friend had kids, they had a pool. So it was like vacation house, right? And every time that we would come out, I would just be like, I love California. It's so beautiful here. Like I would just be stunned by it. And I've always been an artist. And so I came and visited the Bay Area in 2012.
Okay. And
my little sister had like gotten a scholarship to go to this like day camp for people with allergies. And so like, my sister goes to this camp. I come out here and I'm like just amazed at the landscape. And I said, I want to move here someday. And my mom was just like, good luck with that. It's expensive. But full transparency, I used to work in tech. And so I was able to get a job out here and worked that for many years. And then that was how I was able to kind of transplant myself and find myself in the art community in the Bay.
Fascinating. Fascinating. Now, if I read correctly, you got roots here in Chi-Town.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
So I was born and raised in Chicago,
Okay.
and I will say that my favorite art school experience, I know I kind of dogged on them in my last video, but the best art school experience,
We'll get to that. We'll get to that.
the best art school experience I had was in Chicago at this really amazing nonprofit called Marwin.
Okay.
And that place changed my life. I can't recommend it enough. It is such an incredible organization. It is a school for underserved youth. And
Mm.
so what they do is they work specifically with teachers who teach at places like Columbia, SAIC, and
Mm-hmm.
other arts institutions.
Mm-hmm.
And what they do is they bring in these professional artists and they create free classes,
Okay.
free
I
for
love it.
teens. And also, they have an amazing library, and it was just a really great third space, community space. And so I really feel like I grew up there, and it changed for me what I thought of as art, because I was not ever going to go to art school. I was like very pragmatic. My parents are immigrants, so, my mom's like first generation Polish.
Okay.
And so there was no way that art was seen as viable until I started going to Marwin.
Mm-hmm.
And I had these people around me who were not only doing work, but making a living, teaching it and doing it. And then Marwin was like, hey, you qualify for our scholarship. Are you interested in applying to art schools? And I said no. And then by my junior year of high school, I was convinced that it would be a good idea. And they ended up helping me pay for half of my tuition.
That's
So the
amazing.
reason I was able to afford art school is because of Marwin. And so I think that organization is it's always going to have a special place in my heart, always.
That is fantastic. That's amazing. And thanks for sharing that, because you kind of brought up what brought us together today. Is I came across your monologue on your art school experience. And the reason that is, it was triggering for me. I'm not an art school product, and I love hearing about Marwin. How's that spelled? By the way,
Marwen.
Wen. Okay, I'm going to look them up, because that really is fascinating to me. Because one of the things that I'm thinking about, I'm going to do as soon as we get more footing here with Ka-Pow, is I want to open up a nonprofit iteration of it, and I already have the name for it. It's called Portal Creative Access for underserved kids. What kind of inspired that was years ago when Ka-Pow was kind of percolating. I created an app, and I flew out to LA to meet with some friends to do a test group of our app, and of the app that I created for artists, a prompt app. And so while we were there, they put together a great spectrum of individuals, from people that were in art school, people that worked at Nickelodeon, Cartoon Network, Sony Entertainment, hobbyists, right? And the guy who hosted it was working at Nickelodeon at the time. He never met me. This was my best friend who set it up. And long story short, after the actual critique and the demo, we were sitting around eating, and I noticed that many of the creators of color there, I just had a spark. I said, let me ask you something, because I love hearing people's stories, which is why I created Art2Art. How did you guys get into this aspect of the creative arts? And every person of color, they're Black, Hispanic, what have you, we were all introduced to the commercial entertainment side by someone white, right? And that was very telling to me, because for me, it was my Caucasian godmother and her sister, who was the head art director at Leo Burnett in downtown Chicago, right? And
very cool.
One guy was like, yeah, I was tagging walls, and this white guy saw me, and I was, yeah, dude, I was just that kid who could draw in school. And then this white teacher, and what got me was the fact that the message that you can earn a living doing this didn't reach our kids, right? Because we had well-intentioned but ill-informed loved ones, right? That were saying, oh, you like to draw Mickey Mouse, you like to draw Popeye, you like to draw, Superman, but you need to get a real job, right? You know what I mean? And no one said, no, the cartoons you're watching, someone's drawing those. The action figure you're playing with, someone designed that. The video games you're playing with, artists are storyboarding. And I'm like, that never gets to us, right? In our cultures. And so I said, you know what? I want to create something, a nonprofit division to kind of go to these kids. Because I'm in schools all the time. I get invited to go speak. And there's so much talent. My wife and I used to be ministers in the juvenile detention center downtown Chicago, and the incarcerated young men and women there, they didn't know I was a cop because, I'm a retired cop. So I would never tell them I was the police. I was just coming there in a ministerial capacity, but I would tell them afterwards. That's another story. But I would share my story with them, right? On how I grew up in the street, how I can say it now, how I sold drugs before I became a cop. I was in that life, and I would give them copies of my comic, and they were phenomenal artists. Some of them were phenomenal. You hear me? But behind bars, and when I told them, oh, no, I've done work for Marvel and for Warner Brothers, I'm like, are you serious? It's not getting to our kids. And so Marwin, I will be looking them up because they are doing what I desire. It's really near and dear to me. But that, if I walk away from this interview with nothing more than that, thank you for that.
Honestly, I would be honored to know that you're either building partnerships with them or just inspired by them in general, because I'm inspired by them. It's why I'm an educator. And it's why, like, the education pieces that I do, I try to make them as affordable and accessible as possible.
Right.
Because that changed my life. I'm never going to lie that absolutely changed my life. And in a way, it's what I imagine the dream art school being. Like, when I was going to college, Cooper Union was free. Like, if there could be an art school that is zero cost for students, especially students of color and students who don't normally get exposed to these things,
right.
I think that that's the dream, because I think that it needs to be less, the art world is a bad place, but I think that there's a larger world for artists that is much more inclusive and much bigger and much richer than the white cube bubble.
You are speaking to my soul. No, you are speaking to my soul, Mel. No, seriously. And let's kind of back up a little bit and let me tell people what brought me to you. Just so you know, her channel is Persistent Bloom, right? Persistent Bloom, correct?
Mm-hmm.
All right, Persistent Bloom, and randomly showed up in my YouTube feed. I have hope that this channel will grow as I get more consistent, because you were like, oh, her channel's small, but she's in my feed. And when I saw the thumbnail, because it was of particular interest to me, and again, in full transparency, somewhat self-serving, right? I'm like, I listened to the whole. I listened to the whole thing, and
Great.
Just hearing your assessment of your own personal experience. And let me tell you why. Is because the person that gave me the inspiration for Ka-Pow, he was a product of the American Academy of Art, which we know is shuttered, right? And went to school with Alex Ross, one of his classmates, and Thomas Blackshear is one of his closest friends, and of that spectrum, he himself is inducted into the Illustrators Hall of Fame. An incredible guy, but he was the one that gave me, I don't mention his name because things did not end well after I started Ka-Pow. So that's another story.
That happens.
It happens, right? And so anyway, he invited me to teach when COVID hit at the International School of Comics, which had a campus here in Chicago that he helped facilitate as the director of the curriculum and dean of students. And so after lecturing there, they invited me to teach there. Now, mind you, I've never been to art school. Okay, I'm what many consider self-taught. I just tell people, my students, it's just a different type of education, right? It wasn't disseminated to me. I had to hunt it, and I didn't get the vernacular and I didn't speak the lingo. I'm like, oh, that's what that is. That's perspective. That's what that's called, right? That's a value scale. I just called it shading, And so you have to, it's just a different type of learning. And this was all pre-internet, and so you can imagine it was much more archaic. And difficult to get the information, quite honestly, back then. And so anyway, he was a true advocate of formulaic academia, for lack of a better term, right? Typical academia, which I'm not anti. I have put, I don't know how old you are, but I probably have kids close to your age, and I've put them all through school. So I'm not anti that, right? It just wasn't my path, okay? Mm-hmm. And I knew the value for those who needed that. But where we kind of clashed was his strict adherence to the way things were done there, right? And I'm more of an organic guy. I do, I'm ex-military, I'm ex-police. So I believe in structure and order, but I also believe in nuance and the value of, nudging people with a velvet glove to certain things, not saying this is how it must be done. But you know what I'm saying? Right. It's kind of against my psychological profile, even though I thrived in those areas. But that's where we kind of clashed, because I wanted Ka-Pow to be something that was more intuitive, though we have a formal curriculum. I wanted it to be something that actually met students where they were, right? Regardless of their skill set, and cater to how they learned, not just this is how you do this and them thinking this is the only way. But when I came across your video, I felt validated, to be quite honest, right? I kind of felt validated.
Great.
Not that I really needed it, because I was very confident, and our students are a testament to that, and the reviews they've left us. But hearing it from someone that walked that walk, that experienced the benefits as well as the lack thereof, right? And it's a double-edged sword. I want you to speak to that. For those who have not, I'm going to put a link to the video here for my modest audience, but can you speak to that? Just give them the broad strokes of what you shared in that video that left its mark on me.
Yeah, for sure. So for me, I am a very financially pragmatic person, because I feel like after going to art school, my first couple of years out, I was like learning how to rub pennies together to make ends meet. It was definitely really, really tricky and tough in the first couple of years out of art school, where I was living in this basement apartment and trying to teach and trying to follow all the rules and struggling. And then having my mentors, who were my former professors, I ended up becoming very close to them, to my own detriment. And that close relationship continued. Basically, my art school experience never stopped after those 4 years. I continued to follow the rules and structures, similar to what you said, of thriving under rules and structures. If somebody gives me a rubric or a lesson plan or a blueprint of some kind, I'm going to follow it, because I love systems, and that helps me create order in chaos. And so I was like, all right, if I follow these rules, these are my professors. They're helping me. I trusted, right? They are helping me make decisions that are going to be in my best interest. And not only in my best interest, also be pointing me towards something where I could pay back this student loan debt, and I can find success, and maybe I can land amongst them as colleagues, because I really wanted to be an art professor. I saw what they did. Especially one of my teachers was just really, really instrumental. And I feel like his particular perspective and how he ran critiques and things like that was really inspirational to me, and I wanted to give back a very similar thing. However, the further and further I got down this path, and the closer and closer I got to my teachers, the more I realized they weren't super happy. They were struggling. The system was not benefiting them. It was not benefiting me. It was just this regular situation where I felt that no matter how hard I tried or how much work I was putting in, I wasn't getting anywhere. Like, I was running gallery after gallery and just not feeling as though the work was having a real value. And I started an arts publication, and I ran this arts publication for 7 years. And I was a critic in town, and I was trying to understand, like, my goal was, I'm going to, learn how this thing works by taking the whole thing apart, by getting all up in it and seeing what all of the different systems were and seeing how it actually functions. There's this really great book called Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, where I'm a cyclist, and I got really into cycling and really into like the machines of cycling. And I think that with that book, what it helped me realize is that I was trying to learn by getting as deep and as involved as possible to try and see how everything that Marwin had taught me of, like, yes, you can be an artist, was like, how can I actually apply this realistically to the thing I'm trying to do? And I kept doing stuff and then hitting a wall, and then doing stuff and then door slammed in my face, and then doing stuff and door slammed in my face. And I think after 1, 2, 3, 10 different projects where I was spending more money than I was making, I was expending more energy than I had. And then I ended up having a pretty massive health scare while I was overcommitted to things. And my doctor was like, you're burning the candle at both ends, and it has to stop because you are going to make yourself really ill. And if we know anything about this country, that disability is a huge problem that comes from our overwork culture.
Yes.
And so I had to step back and step away. And as I started stepping away, I ended up getting a job offer to work at Apple and teach creativity for free in Apple stores. And that was the most, like, Marwin aligned thing that I had ever been offered. And I loved that job. I loved that job so much. And the pandemic gutted it. And it was really unfortunate and sad to watch that go from this really incredible thing to something much smaller. And due to management issues and eventually a disability that I now have, I had to leave that role, and I left it to become a full-time artist. But in doing so, I feel like the way that I got back to where I am now, and I'm actually trying to make things work, is I have all of those lessons of the art world, and I am not following in those steps at all. I'm actively avoiding galleries. I'm actively avoiding, unless it's, a very, very mindful and caring and compassionate relationship. I'm avoiding museums. I'm avoiding anything that I feel like I'm putting a wall between myself and my audience. And I'm trying to connect and reach people in ways that I think are only possible after, like, where social media is at in terms of helping artists now. Like, it's why I'm on YouTube, because I think that YouTube is finally the place where I can speak in informal and informative language about my work and about the work of others and about what it's like to live and be an artist. And people care. And I can say things about art school, and I can say things about these systems because I know that they weren't serving me. And if what I do is give people permission to say no instead of falling into the same traps that I did, then that's excellent. And that's kind of my main motivation for making that video.
That is a profound motivation, and I salute you. Kudos.
Thanks.
Because there are so many people that they want to advance obviously, as artists, we don't get into this with the expectation of stagnation. Would you agree with that? Right? It's always about progressing forward in our craft and our skill, and ideally in our as a profession. It's about moving the needle forward, right?
That's why I refused to write artist statements when I was in school. I actually kind of got in trouble for this, but my senior year, I just stopped writing them because we were required to write them. Really? And I'm like, first of all, I'm a student. I'm deeply in progress. I'm like discovering my work every day and moving so fast that like trying to create some kind of like static piece of writing of where I am in this very moment makes no sense. And I actually said to my professors, I was like, the goal for me in being in school is to not cultivate stagnation. Exactly what you just said. I was like, I am not here to become like a rock that is unchanging. Even rocks change with weather and erosion and sunlight and earthquakes. Like there's so much change that nature goes through, but being open to that change and trying to avoid that stagnation, I was like, I'm going to submit lists of questions that I'm asking instead of statements because I thought that was more honest. Yes. And I still have the same list of questions from, oh my God, almost 15 years ago when I was in school. Wow. And so it changes and it morphs over time. But I think that was the more honest and like more aligned with the desire to not let the practice go.
Right. I love that. I mean, because that's what I love that as someone that is, again, not a part of that process. You know, it's foreign to me. I can appreciate the purity of it, right? Because as artists, and again, for those of you all watching, she is non-comics adjacent, just so you know. So this kind of proves my point that there are more things that unite us than should divide us. If not just in art, but that's the message for the world, right? Can we kind of focus on the things that we have in common? Because as people, we have way more in common than uncommon. And that's even in the art space. Real. Okay. That's in the art space. A lot of times people just don't connect those dots, right? You know, they live in this echo chamber of what they're doing and, you know, what's par for the course in their sector, you know, the whole 9 yards, and not realizing.
And I will say, I love comics.
You got fans here now. I love it. Who doesn't love comics, right?
How can you not?
How can you not? You know, as a comic artist and an animator, I love illustration. I love painting. I love watercolor. I got hot press and cold press over there and a whole slew of brushes and aquarels and mini blocks so I don't have to tape it down. I can take it. It's about exploration. And what I loved about what you said was it's not about answers. We are forever questioning what's next. How? What about this? You know what I mean? What's around that corner?
It's our inner kid.
It's our inner kid. It's funny. I just did and it's actually getting some traction. I'm sharing my story here on YouTube with a series that is derivative of Art2Art called From Cop to Comics, right? And that's one of the things that kind of resonates with a lot of my students is because there was not an educational entity that fit where I was at a very integral part of my creative journey. When I had the opportunity, I created it, right? And that's what Ka-Pow is. It really is me on a plate. It's like, you know, I had a full-time job, 4 kids, a mortgage, 2 car notes, working 6 nights a week in a squad car, sometimes doing security at a school or bodyguard work. But inside of me was this inner kid. And I mentioned that in the video, this 12-year-old boy just screaming, let me out to play, please. You know, let me out to play. Well, you can't come out to play. You got kids, you got to work, you got health insurance, you got to cut the grass, you got to paint the fence, you know, and the kid is like, please let me out just for a little bit, please, you know. And so when I tell you, everything you're saying just validates my premise is that, no, you don't have to be, you know, though we are comics focused as artists, man, we all feel this fight. We feel it. It's just where it's hitting us at. It just hits us in different places, you know?
Yeah.
And so with your journey, again, it's encouraging me, and I'm sure it's encouraging anybody who's watching this. So I want you to kind of take us, what inspired the video about the problems with art schools? I gotta know, where did that come from? Because I'm not gonna say you were in your feelings because you spoke so eloquently, but it seemed very deep rooted, right? I ain't gonna say you were in your feelings, but I felt your feelings, girl. I felt them.
Yeah. I definitely think I was in my feelings. I had the video I had made prior to it was about why I had quit making art several times. And I actually talk about, like I kept telling myself, I was like, okay, you've been on YouTube for 7 months. It's time to get vulnerable. And I was like, all right, I'm going to tell this story about how like my mentor and I had a very unhealthy codependent relationship and we're going to talk about it. So I like brought that up. But I also, you know, my art school that I talk about in the video, I worked there. I was very deeply involved in that place. Like I graduated and immediately started teaching in their continuing and professional studies program. And I did that from 2013 to 2019. And I taught pre-college art lab. And I was teaching these adult courses using the exact same classrooms as my former professors. And so I never got my MFA, and I'm really glad I didn't, because had I gotten my MFA, I actually think that I would have been so miserable. Because it seems like what the MFA is designed to do is to like break students. And also art school felt very much like, we're gonna teach you what real art is, and if you can survive and persist and continue making your work, then great. And I had to fight the entire time I was in art school to make representational work. I wanted to learn techniques. I was like, I'm coming here and paying this money to learn skills that I can teach later, because I know that y'all are teaching me because that's how you can make a living. Right. And so I just kept being stubborn and kept saying, no, I want to learn technique. I want to learn technique. Sometimes I would take the same figure drawing class or the same thing over and over and over again. And looking back, I would say that depending on the day you ask me, on today, I say I actually had a pretty good time in art school. I learned quite a lot. I am the painter I am today because of art school. However, it definitely left me with a whole lot of emotional damage, and it put me in a position where I thought I had to dance a certain dance for a particular class of people, the like ruling class, collector class people. I thought I had to act in a way that was going to benefit them the most. Right. And the more I did that, the more I was like, this is going to make me go broke or get me into even more debt. Like, this isn't helping me. And I had completely given up on making art. Like, the only art I was making was on my iPad. So I'm a digital painter. I love working digitally. And so I was like, I'm just going to like push myself to do only digital painting. And if I ever get a studio again, fine. And what ended up becoming the thing that brought me back to making work was going to makers markets. So in the Bay Area, there's a really, really big one. And I'm about to talk about this in a video that I'm almost done with, that's all about the language of the art world and how the language of the art world is like my biggest pet peeve. It's like chock full of words that people don't understand. And in my opinion, not including working class people in how you talk about your work is the problem. And that was the biggest problem I had with art school. Is it
an
was
elitist mindset? Would you say like an elitist mindset?
An elitist mindset, and the desire to create. You know, like I've supported myself through retail and sales jobs, and in retail and sales, you learn that you are selling a product.
Right.
And what I was taught to create in art school was a luxury product. And nobody wanted to call it a luxury product, but it was a luxury product in a hyper speculative economy where a lot of rich people use it to dodge taxes. And so not great.
Facts.
Not really where I wanted to be working. And when I went to this art fair, first of all, it was in an old growth redwood forest. So I was like already in, right? The opposite of a white cube, a peaceful, beautiful nature, right? Like Mother Nature is here to hold me in this space. And then on top of that, there's just booths and booths of artists showcasing their work, selling prints of their work, and not limited edition prints, but just prints of their work. And all of a sudden I was like, hold on, this is a thing? This is a very different thing than I had ever seen before. And then I was starting to like wind down at my job. My teaching role was going away, and essentially I was a Radio Shack employee. Like at the end of my time at Apple, I was just selling cables and dongles. I was not teaching classes anymore. And it was super sad.
Maybe I don't have kids your age. You said Radio Shack. I'm just saying.
People think that I'm younger than I am, and I love it.
That's I get the same. You know, chocolate don't melt. So yeah.
Awesome. I love that so much. So yeah, what it came down to was I realized that suddenly there was an economy and a thing that was paying people's bills to do this kind of work. And so I just started asking the artists, I'm like, do you do this every year? Do you usually sell work? Like, where else do you sell your work? Like, what does this happen? Like, how do you do it? And then all of a sudden, like, artists on YouTube started popping up. Like, Katie Mai was doing Renegade Craft Festival, and Little Tiny Egg was doing her local, like, farmer's market. And then this gal named Kelsey Rodriguez, who's now a very good friend of mine, starts popping up on YouTube and is just like, hey, I'm going to, like, teach you as an artist how to make money and make a living from your work and market your work. And I'm like, all of these are very radical ideas that I'm very into. And all of a sudden, the spark and intensity and excitement that I had back when I was a wee art school student became this huge eye-opening and cool moment where I was like, oh, there is another way. I'm going to go this way. And even when I was in the art world, everything was so focused for me on alternative spaces. The thing that got me into art writing and being a critic was actually an artist lecture series that my friend Ayla did in a hot tub.
Okay. That sounds fascinating.
Yeah, it was called the Hot Tub Dialogues. And it was weird. And I think those weird things are what kept me going, because I was like, okay, let's question everything we know about this system and try something different and try to find something that's more sustainable. And I am, almost 1 year out of quitting my job. I left on October 15th of last year. And it is the best decision I've ever made to go this route and to start working in these makers markets, because I'm actually selling my art.
Right.
And I'm selling it to people who are, able to afford a print for $25 or $35. Yeah. And then they hang it on their wall. And when I look at things like Fanime, they love it. But when I look at things like Fanime conventions and like these artist alleys at these like big Comic Cons, and I'm just like, y'all have it right. Like, y'all are doing the right thing. You're meeting people where they are and giving them the art that makes them happy and have joy. And that's what we should be doing as artists, is connecting to those people, not trying to like aim for Sotheby's and like land in debt. Like that to me was the delusion of art school, is that I wish had art school been like, hey Mel, you know, you could do craft markets if you don't want to go the gallery route, and you could start a YouTube channel. And I don't think, you know, in this is totally going to date myself, but like in 2009, 2012, 2013, that was not the case. Like YouTube was not what it is now. And I don't think that, you know, Instagram was a place to share your food and pictures of your cat. It was not a business place. There was no TikTok. Podcasts were like barely becoming a thing. And so I think that we're in a completely new world where artists can also be creators. And yes, that takes a lot of work to be a creator and to make this kind of content, but to be able to share our stories and connect with an audience outside of the traditional art world is liberating. And I think more and more people should do it.
Wow. I'm sure you have just lit a bunch of people on fire. No, seriously, because that's so well said and very, very thoughtful. I can tell that you're passionate about this, and I'm resonating with you because, again, this is my experience as someone that was made to feel, and I think it was, I don't know if it was intentional or if it's programming from art school products, right? That you're somehow less than because you didn't go through their gauntlet, if that makes sense. And
or you go through their gauntlet and you don't get success.
Or you don't get success, you know.
And then you get abandoned by your community. Like,
absolutely.
That sucks.
Absolutely. You know, as someone that was firmly in the pre-digital era, I kind of age myself when I to certain people when I say, you know, I came into the military when it was literally transitioning from analog to digital. And I was a tech that was responsible for transitioning all the equipment from analog to digital in tanks and planes and in the office. Yeah, I'm that old, right? Wow. And so we're talking about, you know, 90, right? You know, I'm like, oh my gosh. And so I was, when I really leaned into the thought, I'll say the thought of becoming a professional artist. Again, none of these online institutions existed. There was no such thing. You know, when I hear a lot of guys, old gray beards like myself in comics, there was no Instagram, there was no YouTube. You literally had to be boots on the ground, or you had to know someone. I'm actually sharing it in an upcoming Cops to Comics episode, how my wife sent off my samples. She mailed them. And, you know, that was like a 2 to 3 week turnaround, right? And she mailed them off without me knowing it to a major publisher, right? And I actually have the letter that he hand typed back to me and sent it via snail mail. I have it right behind me, you know? And so that was the process of validation that, you know, someone had to, on the inside, had to say, hey kid, you got something here, keep working. You know, now you can kind of get that instantly just with likes and follows, right? If you're not intimidated by the robust talent that is in the world entire, because now you also have that weighing on you. Am I good enough? Right? Oh my gosh, look at what this person's doing in Serbia. Oh my gosh, look at this oh my gosh, they're in Japanese and they're 15. Oh my God. You know what I mean? It's all, I get this from my students all the time, and I feel it too, right? You know, I feel it too. But what I like about what you said is the level of accessibility and connectability that we have available to us today that was not, that didn't exist previously. You know, you talk about the farmers markets and the conventions, you know, it was something. When I first went to my first convention, I think I was 23, 24. I didn't even know they existed. Being able to actually talk to the artist. Like, yeah, we have elitism here. Don't get it twisted. But it's comic book famous. You know, I've had to actually call a couple of guys out. And I'm like, dude, really? Nobody outside of this room knows who you walk on the street and see who knows you. No one's going to ask you for your autograph, but in here. Right? It's only going to happen in here. Right? You know,
Yeah.
So we do have that to a small to a degree, but by and large, just the ability to walk up and they're willing to talk to you and give you feedback. You know what I mean? You can ask about their process and their inspirations. And it was through them that I got exposed to these guys were getting things from Art Nouveau and from Gauguin and bringing it to comics. I didn't know who these guys were. I'm like, who's this? Oh, Renaissance period, Impressionist period. What now? You know what I'm saying? And I'm going back. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is cool. You know, and connecting those dots. But when I hear about the elitism, I feel it because I experienced that from art school products. And I'm like, and they're always surprised. And I think it's a compliment when they realize I never went to art school. You know, I actually got recruited by Marvel at 13 years old. They didn't know I was 13. And I'm going to be sharing that in the upcoming video. They didn't know I was 13. Again, there was no internet. My godmother sent some stuff to her sister. Her sister had somebody who was an assistant editor at Marvel in New York. They scanned my stuff, sent it. They sent it back. Here's his number. They called. And my mom's like, what's a Marvel now? You know that boy 13, right? That was a real thing, right? And mind you, I didn't know anything. I was just mimicking what I saw, right? And so it was a little deceiving. I tell my students, no, I wasn't a prodigy in that sense. I was just a very high-level reproducer and somewhat innovator.
You're a good student.
I was a good student of what was in front of my eyes, even though I didn't know what was actually at work in front of my eyes. Does that make sense? You know?
Yeah.
I just knew it looked cool. You know, and I'm like, okay, let's draw this thing, right? And so, as someone that kind of came in clumsily into it, admittedly, and having experienced people that, again, the big words, the $30,000 words, and dropping names, knowing that you have no clue as to what they're talking, they know that. You know, I'm like, see that right there? That's not cool. That's not cool. And so I always wanted to make sure that no matter how I was blessed in my journey, that I maintained a level of humility. You know, I've done some things. I've been fortunate enough to do some things, you know, despite not having a huge resume. The biggest thing that I get from a lot of people, just why I'm doing Cops to Comics, is, who are you? I get that every show when they see my work. Like, why haven't? Because everyone thinks because if you're good, they must know who you are, right? And I'm like, no, dude, I did 30 years as a cop. This wasn't my living. This was something, you know, that I kind of did in between time. I had 4 kids by the time I was 23. I had 4 kids, you know, and I was married at 22. You know, my life looked a lot different. My journey was a lot different. And so that's one of the reasons why we tell, you know, our slogan is the real school for real people with real lives. I get it. I understand you want to learn this, but you can't afford $40,000 a year. You know,
I don't think that anyone in the working class actually can. And I think that that's the fundamental problem, you know, with like runaway inflation on tuition is the things that made me sad was I was so close to people at KCAI, right? I was so close to people who were in the academy, and I still am, you know, like I'm actually like writing a letter for someone to get tenure because I thought that they were an incredible professor. But I think that there are still amazing people who work there. Yeah. But I think the big problem is how much venture capital has like, and just, you know, investments in general have like wormed their way into like supporting construction projects and wormed their way into the institution. And now, you know, unfortunately, college debt has become this thing that these big banks they're like, oh, this is great. we're always going to get our money on this.
Yeah.
Because
it's guaranteed.
These kids they're guaranteed, and the kids can't default or go bankrupt on it. And so we're going to sell this as a product that these people need, but at the same time, we're not going to teach them the consequences. Like, I didn't have loan counseling. Like, there was never a conversation that happened with me. And this was like one of the main things that frustrated me that I mentioned in the video, is there wasn't anyone to be like, this is what your loan payment is going to be. However, my parents, I got into CalArts, and CalArts is prestigious, and I wanted to go. Yeah. And I talk about CalArts in that video.
Yeah, you do.
My parents were like,
you gave all the smoke. Just FYI, watch the video, y'all. Mel brought all the smoke. I was like, you go. I was like, yeah, like, boy, go tell it.
My mom, this was back in 2008, 2009. So the recession had happened, right? And my mom and I were looking at CalArts. And luckily I did have a mom who understood high interest credit card debt. And it was a thing that my parents always struggled with growing up in Chicago. But I think the big thing that she told me is, she was like, you have to avoid this. You have to avoid these variable rate private loans. And if you go to CalArts, the government can only give you so much, right? Like, the government loans are a guaranteed fixed interest rate. And so she was able to explain to me, there's a fixed interest rate, and then there's variable interest rates that go up and down with the market. And she's like, and the market right now is not good with the recession. And she's like, signing on to these private loans are very dangerous. And I'm really glad that I had pragmatic parents who were like, hold up, no. And I'm also really glad that I applied to state schools, because what I was able to actually do, and I didn't talk about this in the video, but I should have, is that I got into state schools in Illinois. University of Illinois had a really great art program.
Yep.
And I actually used my award letter from how much U of I was going to give me to go back to KCAI and be like, actually, can I have a little bit more assistance? And they matched U of I. So not only was I able to get the scholarship from Marwin, but I paid what I would have paid to go to the University of Illinois. So essentially, not quite a state school, but a state university. I paid the same amount to go to a 4-year private art college. And that felt worthwhile. I still have the debt. It still follows me around. But I think that I don't regret going. I truly don't regret going, but I do think that it needs a revamp to continue to, it needs a revamp, and it also needs to scale back the cost increases, because they're unsustainable.
I love your balanced approach to this. I'm not one for, I'm a fan of balance and nuance, just FYI.
Yeah.
There's pros and cons. Like I tell my children, there's pros and cons to everything. It really is, what's the trade-off, and what are you going to get, and what are you willing to give for it? What is that line in Full Metal Alchemist, the law of equivalent exchange? For something to be granted, something of equal or greater value must first be sacrificed. So what are you willing to get in return of that? And is it worth it in the end? Are you better off for it, or are you going to be a victim of the law of diminishing returns? Right? That's a lot of people don't think that far. They think, "Ooh, I want." And you may want that, but you're going to pay. The piper's got to get paid. And make sure you read the fine print, because he's going to come a knocking, and you better have his money. You know what I mean? And so, even with that, I get asked a lot of times, and I want you to speak to this, because I try not to. One of the things that I take great pride in, for lack of a better term, is my integrity. So when people come to me about Ka-Pow, especially in this social media climate where you don't know who to trust, it really is like, who can I? Mel, I'm running an ad right now. I just started running it a couple of days ago for our new offering. And which is even if Ka-Pow wasn't affordable enough, we have something even more compact that if you want, and it really is like just so that my instructors can get paid for the value that they bring, and so that we can continue to grow. But it's not, it's smaller, it's bite size. People have been inboxing me just to see how I would respond. Ooh, I didn't know if this was a scam. And I take no offense to that. I get it. I'm like, no, I totally get it. So for me, trust matters. So when I have people come to me and they say, well, because what we don't do is we don't discuss the price of Ka-Pow up front. And that gives people red flags. And I'm like, no, the reason I don't do that is because of my experience when I taught at the International School of Comics. People were doing it simply because they could afford it. And they were more curious than they were committed, if that makes sense, right? Mm-hmm. And the students were horrible. The majority of them were like, you were an instructor. I hated teaching them. It felt like I might as well be talking to this wall. Seriously, it was that, And so when I opened up Ka-Pow, I'm like, well, we're not going to lead with price, but I usually give them a ballpark comparison, right? I'm like, 1 year here isn't 3 years with us, and their eyeballs bulge. I said, that's all I'm going to give you. Go through the process, But because of the integrity factor, I always tell people there's pros to cons to every institution, no matter what it is, including this one, right? Like one of the biggest things that many formal institutions have leveraged effectively, and I think rightfully so, is the network building amongst your fellow alums. That happens. You guys were in the trenches. Now these people are at this studio and they're working here and they're going to France and they need a guy. Oh, I know a guy. Right. And they go back and, hey, I was in class with Mel, that is a huge value. And I tell people, no, you won't get that per se here because we're small. Right. I said, but what you will get taught is how I did it. Right. And it still applies. How to go to this show. This is what you say. This is what your booth looks like. This is how you price yourself. You know what I mean? Set these metrics for every show. This many handshakes, this many cards, this many emails. How to go in there, right, with a plan, and you walk out and you're like, okay, I met this guy, I met this editor, I met this artist. You know what I'm saying? And how to build your own network in your own words. I would like to hear you kind of summarize the pros for you in your journey through conventional art school.
Yeah. I would say the pros, that network definitely is a huge, huge part of it. I definitely feel like I have an excellent community. I feel like I was able to access ideas that I wouldn't have had access to before. And I'm actually going to talk about this a lot more in detail in the next video that I'm making, because I'm talking about like the theoretical readings and stuff that I did in art school and the philosophy. It's hard to learn that stuff. And I really struggled with reading it, but I did get a lot out of that level of curiosity. It actually, like the curiosity and the way that I was taught to learn in art school has been essential to my marriage. My spouse is a graduate of UC Berkeley. Okay. And we both are recovering academics, but are like the ability for us to like kind of joke about things that we learned or also still understand that inside language is really cool. It's nice to be able to understand things and to be able to then translate them in a more approachable way.
Right.
I think my favorite thing about art school is the way that it taught me to understand color. I have all of these like color charts on my wall here. And the way that I see color and the way that I understand the world is forever changed because of those perspectives that I got. I think that art school is really, really great for people who can afford it. And I think that there are a lot of alternatives out there, like the schools that you're creating, like trade schools, like I teach at a community art center. I think that there are a lot of other options out there to get the information.
Right.
And I think, I'm trying to think of like other positives. I got really good at writing about my work. I got really good at talking about it and defending it. I think that I'm able to make really, really confident conversations happen in those makers markets, because I think half of the hardest part is not just making the work, but telling people about it and sharing with them, and building those relationships and connections.
Yes.
And, you learn how to do that kind of informally at art school, but the unofficial part of my degree that helped me do that the most was working in retail and actually working in sales and service. And learning how to understand the customer journey, learning how to be like a really good point person for people. I think those were very fundamental, and also helped me to unlearn some of the more problematic things in art school. Also, my technical skill is the most important thing I got out of art school. Being able to spend 16 weeks sculpting the nude figure in the round in clay.
Yeah.
Where else am I going to do that?
Right.
Other than in art school or a traditional atelier. I think that it has pros too.
Yeah.
But the thing that you were talking about with pricing models, I immediately think of how writers and thinkers that I really love, like Adrienne Marie Brown, she runs this thing called the Emergent Strategy Institute. And the way that they do things is they do everything on a sliding scale. So that's what I try to do with the retreats that I teach. So I make custom creative retreats for people. And I try to either do them through sliding scale pricing or through scholarship pricing, because I know that there are barriers for people to be able to access this type of education. And so I try to find ways to make my offers as affordable and accessible as possible because of that Marwin influence, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of my approach there.
And again, that encourages me personally, because never read it, never heard of it, but I'm an avid reader. I read about 4 to 6 nonfiction books a month. I'm kind of an autodidact that way. But I'm going to look for it. But what it validates is the fact that, I'm very big on making sure that we fit, right? So for those who are curious, I get inbox all the time. The application process is 2 steps. First, you meet with one of our alums or my daughter, who grew up under me in that culture, right? And very targeted questions from my FBI trained interrogation certification. I'm looking for certain answers and how you answer, because I want to make sure that we fit, and if we don't fit, let me be quite honest. I want more students. I've probably turned away way more students than a savvy business person would recommend for a sustainable business. Let's just say it that way, right? It's definitely inverted, but it's because I don't want to put a round peg into a square hole. You understand? I want to make sure we fit. What are your goals? Can we get you there? When I taught at the School of Comics, one of the things that bothered me was after a few months of teaching there, because mind you, I've never taught this. I'm in the church. I'm clergy. I'm used to being in front of crowds, even though I'm on the spectrum. I kind of have coping mechanisms for that anxiety, right? And of course, being a cop, I love how you talk about the people factor from retail. That has taught me how to interact and read and gauge and serve, quite frankly. And so one of the things that I experienced at the school was shortly in, I saw how disconnected many of the students were. And so finally I took it upon myself, because we're in COVID. I put a breakout room. I took each one by one. Meet me over here. Right? Why are you here? And they would tell me how they got into the school and what they were looking for. And the ones that were the most disconnected were the ones that were not being served, what they were promised. And I'm like, if that's what you were looking for, why are you here? They don't teach that here. Who told you this was a good idea? Right? And it was the person at the front end on intake. And that bothered me. It bothered me. Now, granted, let's be clear. When I went to the school, they knew that I was already building Ka-Pow. They actually brought me in there because they hoped that I would help them transition to virtual, because my entire plan was virtual and I had all the infrastructure in place, right? But as I was talking to them, I'm like, no, that's not how this goes. What? And it felt like a money grab. I'm like, you're just fleecing these people. How much more so? Now, mind you, this is a trade school, very similar to what Ka-Pow is. How much more so? Let's 10x that to the $60,000 a year, and like one of my students, I'm about to post their testimonials that literally brought me to tears off camera. I was not going to record that. But she talks about how she went to a presentation by SCAD. And I know SCAD is a wonderful school, but she just wanted comics. And she's like, why am I paying? And she kept asking about the comics program. And they were kind of deflecting about all the other stuff that they offer. Now, they do have a comics program because my head instructor, his brother, teaches it at SCAD, right? So there's a SCAD connection here. So I'm not anti-SCAD, but she was like, well, why am I paying, I think she said $60,000 a year? And I just want to do this one thing. You know what I mean? But you're going to make me do all these other things. And I don't think I need this one thing to learn what I need to learn, especially to apply it how I want to apply it. I want to do my own comics. I'm not trying to work at Marvel. I'm not trying to work at DC. I want to do my own comics. And that was very telling to me. And I'm like, so let's 10x that now. How many students are being sold a bill of goods at these exorbitant rates, that even with the pros, they're still left, much like yourself, paying off debt that they cannot get from under years, some of them decades later.
Yeah, I think there's kind of a twofold thing. Like in that student that you're describing, one, I remember going into art school and absolutely, like, my 18-year-old self was like, I want to learn either illustration or graphic design. And I am never going to take a class in ceramics because I don't like working in 3D. I don't like working in ceramics. Somehow I ended up in painting. And also my favorite class that I took in the entirety of my time in art school was a ceramics class. It was a sculpture class. And it taught me everything I needed to know about drawing the figure. And so I was like, okay, this is not what I had originally planned. Right. And I think that, a benefit of art school is that it does shape and change you based on the experiences that you have. You long for certain conversations and you kind of go after certain things. But I think that the vagueness of like what professional practice will look like for students is the part where I think things not only get hairy, but they get really uninclusive because it's not any longer about trying to, I don't know, like I think that the way art school is set up is it's set up to teach you how to think, and it's set up to teach you like how to have a different perspective on the world and continue to be a lifelong learner. And I think that it does that very well. That is what it does very well. What it doesn't do very well is connect students to professional opportunities, because I think the infrastructure is not there. And a lot of the students who have found professional success have a little bit of a bitter taste in their mouth, because the thing that was seen as the most valid was being in the academic art world, was being in a traditional path. But I have friends who studied illustration, who studied graphic design, who immediately after graduation got jobs in their field and paid off their student debt. And I was a little jealous that I didn't go to graphic design. I definitely think that, having a scale of what you want to do, because to be an independent comics creator, you are going to need to think about your lifestyle. And I don't think that there's enough conversations about like, how do you want to, hold on, like 18-year-old, how do you like to work? You've been working in a job for 2 years, hopefully. And you have now put yourself in a position where you're going to go to school. Do you want to go to school where you have a job in an office? Do you want, and that's why I didn't go into graphic design or illustration, because I knew I wasn't the office type. I tried convincing myself that I was the office type when I was working at Apple, but I wasn't. I think, like, do you want to work in an office? Do you want a flexible schedule? Do you plan on having a family and kids? where about in the country do you want to live? Do you want to live in a city? Do you want to live in a very expensive city? Do you want to live in a very expensive state? And having all of these, or a very cheap one, right? And having all of these different conversations are important, because then it can say, hey, well, maybe I go to community college for a couple of years and try and get some of these credits out the way. And I also start stalking people on LinkedIn, or maybe not stalking, that's the wrong word. I just start looking people up on LinkedIn. Right. And reaching out to them and being like, hi, I'm 18. Can I have coffee with you and ask you how you got to where you are?
Absolutely.
And try to replicate that and actually look at what are the jobs that I can get. Because admissions counselors are salespeople.
Facts.
And we don't want to say that they are salespeople, but that's have
what they
sales
are.
Goals.
They have metrics. They have KPIs. Yes.
They have KPIs. They have metrics. I don't think they work on commission. I really hope they don't. But
wouldn't surprise me though. Wouldn't surprise me.
The admissions departments are unfortunately not student advocates. They are supporting the business of the school. And that is really hard when you have an impressionable, young, hormonal child. Which is a teenager.
Facts. Absolutely.
Who is stubborn as hell, which was me. And then parents who are trying to say, okay, kid, I want you to get the best opportunity possible. And if the school is like, look at all these shiny opportunities you can do that aren't comics or that aren't the thing, we're going to point you towards the ways our alums have found direct success in going these paths. And those are the paths that we can teach you. This other independent path that you want to go is not going to be something that you do. And if I were to go back in time, there was an extension at my school where I could take classes at the University of Missouri, Kansas City. And I should have been taking business courses, marketing courses, copywriting courses, like video editing courses. Like I should have been deepening my marketing and entrepreneurship skill set, because so much of what you are as an artist is a freelancer.
Oh, you are a self-sustained business, and most people don't understand that.
That income is so
it's going to fluctuating. That's the curse of the entrepreneur. And so you're really all in my wheelhouse right now, because that's why the instructors that I employ here at Ka-Pow they're currently doing the thing, right? They are living the life that you are trying to aspire to. And we hold nothing back. You get you get all the stories. Okay. And what it really looks like, seriously. And again, it's a trust factor for me. It's like, no, are you cool with working a full-time job and this being your 9 to 5, and then this is your 5 to 9? That's what it looks like for us. Right. And we also teach them how, like the majority of us, we tell them, I'm doing an ad campaign. I'm actually scripting it out now that, going into comics is a bad move. So why do you do it? Right. And there's other reasons why we do it. It's not to make money. It's not, many of us don't earn the living from the thing. It's from all the freelance things that allow us to do the independent thing, and we teach our students that, like when it comes to the copywriting and the marketing, we have an addendum once they're done. We have our first students graduate, completing the course this year, which I'm very proud of. We're only 3.5 years young. And I teach that personally, because I'm the one doing all the things. I'm doing the copywriting, the video editing, the YouTube, the Instagram, the LinkedIn, right? I'm making the partnerships with conventions and teaching, the supplemental courses and stuff like that. And so I'm like, no, this is how to brand yourself, from your card to, all right, this is how your booth should look. This is what's wrong with these booths. I don't care that you see this many at cons. This is how the person on the other side feels when they go up to a booth like this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's all those little nuanced things. And all of my instructors, again, we've had some very reputable people in the industry, which I'm very humbled by their inquiry as to be employed by us, but they're elitists. And I'm like, see, I can't have that in front of these people. You know, they have to know that what they're doing is attainable, that, you know, that you're not going to demean them for where they are in the process because you are at a different time in a different era. And, you know, or at the same token, you can't seem too far away. You know, that's my thing. Like, can I get to where you are? Is that reasonable? You know, one guy, very heavy hitter, who shall remain nameless, inquired as if I were hiring. And, you know, I did my cop thing and I did some research. And though a lot of people don't know me, I know a lot of people, right? I know key people, right? So I made a couple of phone calls, people that are actually in that, you know. So I like kind of YouTube is intimidating because I like staying in the shadows. I believe there's power there, right? Being the man behind the curtain. I kind of like it there. But Ka-Pow has forced me to kind of come out, right? And so anyway, I found out that this guy was an absolute jerk. And everything I felt about him was true. That his reputation, even though he was comic book famous, he wasn't a first pick on many jobs. He was kind of like, because of how he navigated people. And so my thing is with the people that we're getting 19-year-olds that are working at Starbucks. We're getting Amazon workers that are in their mid 40s. You know what I mean? That have this passion. And it's very important to me to make sure that we're not selling them a pipe dream. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, no.
Yeah. Especially when you have someone who comes from an elitist background, who comes from the idea of the fact that art school is meant to break people.
Yeah.
I think that is such a huge issue, is that, like, I remember getting into CalArts and being like, so I just want to ask, you know, am I going to be able to study painting? Like, I'm interested in learning traditional oil painting, figurative painting, landscape painting. And I asked this question, and the admissions counselor said to me point blank, you are going to get an art enema and learn what real art is.
Right.
And
wow.
My mom said, like, my mom was in the room and she was just like, absolutely not. You are not going here. Like, this is...
That is a very horrible picture. You're going to get an art enema. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. But
is that coffee or water? Or is it oil paint? I'm like, what does that look like?
Like, truly. And like, the work that I saw from graduating seniors that year was not good. And I think that the hard thing, like, what sold me on KCAI was the student work and seeing so many people working figuratively in oils.
Yeah. Doing what you want to do.
Techniques.
Right.
Like learning the technique.
Yeah.
Now, granted, I did have professors, like, I will never forget this one particular critique I was in with a professor who was an incredibly skilled painter and asked a fellow student, why are you here? And the fellow student goes, I am here to learn techniques so that way I can teach them. And the teacher, in their elitist delusion, just goes, I am here to teach the next great artist.
Wow.
That's what you should be here for. And I remember my eyes just rolling in the back of my head and just being like, what a fucking idiot. Like, I was just like, this is delusion on every level. Like, it's delusion from the instructor to think that, like, these were instructors who, I had one teacher who was driving, like, I didn't have a car, but, cause I couldn't afford it, but like, I had a lot of friends and who had nicer cars than the instructors. Like, I had a friend with like a Volvo, and then most of my instructors were driving like old beat up Nissans from like 1992, and every time that they like started it was like just like plumes of like gray smoke, and
called
it was,
the EPA.
Well, there's no smog tests in Missouri. It's like it's wild west. Unlike Illinois, where you have to go get your test done. But but it just like wasn't it wasn't it was very clear to me the economic difference.
Yeah.
And then the year following, I had a very different instructor who was very pragmatic and very honest about her financial position, and she had just had a kid, and she's like, I am working part-time and selling my plasma to live.
Get out of here.
And
Get out of here.
I will never forget her level of honesty about that.
Oh my god.
But she was like, I can't afford childcare. And, you know, she was known for like bringing her son to school. And I thought it was great. I was like, normalize this, like normalize having your kids around. I love it. Right. But I think that there's just, like, once I started calculating how much instructors make, like the adjunctification of these schools is part of the problem, because you get these people who have like just come out of grad school, just come out of a hyper elitist mindset where they've had to defend themselves through theories and through manipulating their work to appease the tastemakers and holders of the ruling class, right? But I think, you know, what's really hard is then you are going into these situations where you're now having to teach young, impressionable kids who are looking to you as a reason to grow, they're looking at you and saying, hey, help me figure out my work, help me figure out the things that I want to be doing. And you are, as an instructor, up against a whole host of things. These instructors are, you know, they have this historical elitism. They have all of these things that they think that they have to do and ways that they have to teach because that's how they were taught they have to be. And then on top of that, they're incredibly impoverished. Most adjunct instructors in the United States and most colleges are hiring about 70% adjuncts on average. There's a gal named Zoe B who has an entire video on the adjunctification of American colleges.
One of my instructors just got hired as an adjunct he's in Missouri, and he just our head instructor at Ka-Pow just got hired as an adjunct. I had to write him a letter of recommendation, and wow, I didn't know that was a thing.
But they're impoverished. Like, these people are, most of my friends who work in academia live on food stamps and like government assistance because the pay is so bad. Like, so bad.
Wow.
So I remember when I was looking into graduate school, I think the Kansas City Art Institute at the time was paying, I think it was $3,500 a class. So $3,500 a class times the maximum classes you can teach as an adjunct in a semester is 3, and then 2 semesters a year. That's $21,000.
Wow.
That's not a living wage.
No.
I don't know where you get rent out of $1,750 before taxes.
Right.
Like, that's, so you have like these two diametrically opposed things. You have people who are taught to uphold the status quo of this elitist and very exclusive world while also being starved and having to work at multiple different universities in order to try and make ends meet. And what you end up with is nobody is willing to question the systems because they have put all sunk cost fallacy, right? They've put all of this work, all of this time, all of this effort into getting this degree and getting this job. They finally have their adjunct professor position at a 4-year college of art and design or at a state school or at a private college, right? And then they also have the shitty competitive politics of the art world. They have the really, really messed up adjunctification of schools and the fact that there are no full-time jobs. Like, all of these people who went to grad school thinking, if I work in academia for 10 years, then I'll qualify for public student loan forgiveness, the thing that I was taught by my professor. Just go be a professor like me, and you'll qualify for public student loan forgiveness for public service. But in order to do that, you need a full-time job, not an adjunct job. None of those years of adjunct work count for that. So you have no, that doesn't count. That's not full-time work.
That's a setup,
on-call
man.
work.
That's a setup.
It is a huge setup.
Wow.
So you
Wow.
have all of these people who have been competing and competing and competing with each other through these systems that do nothing but like keep them down and keep them poor. And that to me is like, there needs to be a union. Like there needs to be like a national adjuncts union. Like
Right.
I come from a union family. Like you were a cop, you know the power of unions.
Yes.
Like unions are amazing. And I
Yeah.
think that more artists need to band together and just be
I'm a
like,
fan.
enough is enough of this.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're not going to keep being mistreated and treated as like pawns in this game that are only supporting the administrators and the people who are making profits off of these schools. Even if they're nonprofits, there are people who are investors who are giving them bonds to do these construction projects. And those investors are making that money, and it's driving tuition up. Like it has to be talked about. It is very bad. The system is broken. The teachers themselves, I don't think are broken, but I think that the system itself is absolutely in need of a massive, massive labor movement force to change.
Wow. I mean, you have dropped some straight up truth bombs. You have gone straight nuclear. This is why I wanted to have you on here. Seriously. I'm a modern day, my kids and those who know me, I'm considered a modern day Spartan. I'm always up for a good fight. You know, much to, even though I'm getting older, you can't tell me that. But this seems very much like a fight worth fighting. It seems righteous. And you don't know this unless you've been in it. And again, I'm a seeker of knowledge. This is foreign to me. And I'm okay with that because just like you've educated me, I'm sure you've educated in your videos, many others. And so I just want to thank you for sharing and being so honest and transparent and shedding light on such issues. And again, this meant a lot to me. I didn't expect to get what I got from this, to be quite honest. Because a lot of times I am, I'm not an unintelligent man, and I'll just say that, but I always hedge against my bias. That's how I kind of calculate. I have other businesses, but I try to hedge and calculate for my bias and my limited perspective on things. And for me, you brought me a level of reassurance moving forward with what I envisioned for Ka-Pow and even for Portal Creative Access. I tell my students, to date, I don't get paid. Just in full transparency, I run Ka-Pow. I'm not getting paid. My instructors are getting paid. It's not that. And I need to get paid because wifey's looking at me like, okay, brother. You know what I'm saying? We got things that need handling, but she has the patience of a saint because she knows the reasons why I'm doing it. It is, it's a vocation for me because I love art, and specifically the comic and animation craft. It's been good to me. It's been good to my family. But all that to say this, in the doing, it's always the things that you don't know that get you, right? And for me, this has been profound validation that at least currently I'm tracking, because this is what I have hypothesized. I'm like, because I knew what I couldn't do. Do you understand what I couldn't afford?
Yeah.
Right. I've rubbed shoulders with people. I've had one of our students. She actually was a student at the American Academy of Art, and she dropped out to join us. And I was like, "Whoa, you sure you want to do that?" You know what I mean? And I laid it all out for her. But you don't know until someone comes in and says, "Hey, you're not crazy." You know what I mean? This is needed. I see how people are, and I'm one of them. Times are hard for all of us. You know what I mean? Times are hard for all of us. We just put on good faces. I put on good faces. You know what I mean? Misery loves company, so I'd rather fly solo. Let's just do solo for now. Okay. But trust me, it could be a party around these parts, if we're not careful. And knowing that someone like you is out there giving voice to this for artists. And again, she's not a native comic person. We're talking artists. This is Art2Art. We are talking as two creatives that, again, there are many bridges that connect us. Let's not focus on the one river that divides us, because there's many rivers that connect us. And you've put me in a good headspace today. I gotta say that. Awesome. No, I'm serious. You have put me in a good head, and I'm sure many others that needed to hear. And let's be aware. And again, we're not knocking it as a path. We're knocking the systems. We are looking at the pervasive greed and the predatory nature that many of these institutions have perpetuated for decades. And if nothing else, social media has shown, because now I think I read a study, I think it's in 2027, someone correct me, feel free to leave it in the comments, but in the near future, a vast majority of companies that once required a bachelor's degree are abandoning that practice. They want people who can do the job. And they're like, a lot of the people that they are employing in certain fields are like, I'm seeing this guy on LinkedIn and he doesn't have a bachelor's degree, but they can do the job. Mm-hmm. I'm seeing this mom over here on YouTube, and they're reaching out to these people, and it's the systems. It's not the education. Yeah. Let's not mistake two different things. Those are two totally different arguments. If you're not being taught, that's one thing, right? And you have eloquently expressed that no, the education was there. It was the trade-off. It's like, wait, what's it costing me to get this? Is not, the math ain't mathin'. You understand? The math ain't mathin'. Okay. Yeah. And so if you find yourself in that position, I would encourage you guys, check out Persistent Bloom. Reach out to her. I'm a fan. Just understand that I'm a fan now. Okay. And I tell people I'm not a fan of resumes. I'm not a fan of work. I'm a fan of character. You want to make a fan of me? Show me your character. Show me who you are. And you have done that. And I subscribed immediately. I watched that one video. I'm like, yep, subscribe. Just FYI. Right. But in moving forward, as we close out, is there anything you'd like to share or promote? What do you got going on in the works? Where you're going to be at? Let the people know what you got going on.
Yeah. So I have a really great Substack where I share kind of thoughts from the studio and process. My newsletter is kind of evolving to be things that I've unlearned from art school, but it'll also be beneficial things that I have learned in art school. I'm going to start a program very soon that I'll be announcing on the newsletter. That'll be these drop-in sessions where if you want to come nerd out with me about color, or you want to come talk about watercolors, difference between watercolor and gouache, or you want to talk about techniques or like how I organize my systems, like I'm going to be doing these like quick little informal persistent bloom sessions that are going to be sliding scale prices. I am opening up creative retreats again in October. So those are custom retreats that people can do in nature. So I will meet with someone one-on-one, find out what their goals are, and then I create a series of writing prompts and creative prompts for them to go out and do it at a campsite or at a cabin, or if they want to, at a local like spa resort and get their massages and then work on their art. Whatever scale people want to do is the way that I run my retreats, and they're all virtual. So you don't have to travel to California. Okay. You can do them wherever you're at the price point that works for you. And so I'm doing that. And then I'm an adventure artist. So a lot of the other videos that I make on my channel are me going out and going on adventures. I have a really great commission that I'm working on right now where the client asked me specifically to find some madrone trees. So the next video that I'll put out after the art rating one is going to be all about this like adventure to find this tree and the process of coming home and working on sketches and thinking about like prototypes and sketching and creating a pitch deck for a client.
Love it. I love it. So I'll send me links so I can leave them in the description. And again, you're doing a much needed work for artists everywhere. Again, if this never happened, again, check out her YouTube channel. The video was enough for me. You know, I just reached out cold and like, hey, I'm never afraid of a no, or not right now. But I'm truly honored that you decided to sit down with me on this Art2Art chat. And hopefully I can be of some value to you in the future. Again, I would love to add you to my network. And so thank you guys so much. And wow, you guys understand these conversations are about edifying you guys as creatives. And we're on the same path, just along different roads, but the path is the same for many of us, and you're not alone. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. You got something you want to say or how you feel, if you agree, disagree, I want to hear all of it. As long as it's respectful, I just may reply. Okay. I reserve that right because I don't like being triggered, but anyway, thanks a lot, Mel. And, you take care. And this is Doc Soul. And remember, as I always say in closing, life is short, so live, love, and laugh as if it's your last day on earth, knowing that when all is said and done, when you leave here, all that will be remembered is the life you've lived, the lives you touched, and the stories you've created. So what are you waiting for? Solo out. Thanks, Mel.
Thank you.
Okay, well, hopefully you found that as informative and enlightening as I did. Again, Mel came in with full knowledge of who I was and what I'm trying to do here at Ka-Pow, and she was gracious enough to lend her voice and to give her perspective. And I loved how it was balanced. It's not demonizing any type of education, but we all know, and from the social media circles and whatnot, the real precarious situations that conventional art schools and schools for that matter are having, which I think is a prime time for entities like Ka-Pow to kind of step forward and offer alternatives, especially for those that want specific learning. And so if you're interested in learning the comic craft and pursuing your storytelling dreams and learning from an incredible crew and participating in an incredible community, check us out at Ka-Pow School everywhere, and check us out at teachyoutodraw.com for more information. And if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. I answer everything personally, but we are underway with our new adult class, a new year, and we're about to graduate our alumni. And so feel free to check out the testimonials. I'll be posting more if you want more about Ka-Pow. Check out our website. If I don't get to your comments, please forgive me. It is very hectic this time of year, but it's not too late. If you want to join our motley crew over here at Ka-Pow, visit teachyoutodraw.com and set up your free 15 to 20 minute interview, your application interview, and we'll go from there. So with that being said, remember, life is short. So live, love, and laugh as if it's your last day on earth, knowing that when all is said and done, all that will ever be remembered of you is the life you've lived, the lives you've touched, and the stories you've created. So, with that being said, what are you waiting for? Get to it. I'll check you later. Solo out.